Seemingly every week now, we're seeing stories where they're trying to tell us how great and wonderful the world's going to be when we just put chips in our brain.
It's not like life was ever perfect or simple, but you're going to pretty much long for the simple times. At least I will be. They've already talked about pretty seriously how your brain could be the new ultimate password, because passwords aren't secure. Hackers and algorithms can guess them and you can't remember them. So they're just going to read your neurosignatures, and those are going to be truer than any PIN number or 20-digit random character that, could be come up with. And they won't even stop at the RFID chip we've been hearing about for decades now, the mark of the beast, where everyone's going to have it to buy and sell, as creepy as that is. But of course they're getting to the point, and they've been working on this for so long, but now they're pushing it publicly, you understand, having microchips inserted in the brain to enhance, quote unquote, your cognitive abilities and to tap into your brain to read and write neural code. Right now in the news is a guy named Brian Johnson from Kernel who's pitched in $100 million or so of his own money, and he's determined to get these brain chips happening in the next 10 to 15 years. Of course, he's got to be working with DARPA and related agencies, but they are making a serious push. I mean, the guy has gone full Kurzweil, and you never go full Kurzweil. Look at his TED Talk hands.
People like this guy, they always go off on this topic like there's no possible downsides to this technology at all, that it's all going to be amazing when we all plug our brains right into our computers. And what could possibly go wrong?
Apparently nothing could go wrong. This guy, Brian Johnson, with the most generic name on the planet, he literally said, quote, "The bigger question is this working on a luxury or a necessity? I don't understand what we're so scared of losing." He doesn't get it. He doesn't get what the downsides would be. He thinks this should be the singular focus of the human race, to hack and decode the brain and put a computer chip in it so AI and advanced computing systems can direct us, can change our memories. And he's openly talking about creating perfect memories, deleting bad memories, living experiences, as if you were a cowboy in the 1800s, or having people buy and sell their memories.
Yeah, Total Recall.
Exactly. All this dystopic fiction is coming true. And he's even talking about people bioengineering themselves to live underwater in the oceans in the future and breathing like dolphins and seals.
Never mind, he doesn't say how that's even going to remotely be possible just because you stuck a chip in your brain, that you can somehow withstand those depths. And it's ridiculous.
But the creepiest part is that they're trying to push this on the public. They're trying to make it sound trendy. And the guy's literally talking about how this is going to be a democratized technology like smartphones. They want them in everyone's hands. They don't only want the rich and powerful and the wealthy and the trendy to have them. They want poor and average people to have them too. Brain chips in your head. Today you've got the smartphone. Tomorrow they'll be in your head. That's what this guy wants.
They want them in everyone's heads, yeah. And the thing is they never talk about the potential downsides. But lately, I'm starting to actually see articles that do broach that subject. And it has to do not just with your privacy, but your actual autonomy. And experts are now starting to come out and say, hey, wait a minute. This actually isn't going to just look like the movie The Matrix. This might actually be a serious problem. It says right now these technologies could exacerbate social inequalities and offer corporations, hackers, governments, or anyone else new ways to exploit and manipulate people. Yeah, you got that right. When they're literally in your brain. Is the issue going to be privacy? Will these devices be able to read your thoughts as you walk around the same way cameras now capture your image? Well, we already know, after having looked into this, that the answer to that is yes. And they talk about autonomy. Will devices that read your thoughts and autofill what you want to do next make you feel like your free will has been hijacked? The ethical thinking has been insufficient. That statement is so underwhelming for the gravity of this particular situation. Science is advancing to the point where suddenly you can do things you never would have thought possible. That's a nice way of putting it. And you have all these people like Ray Kurzweil and Elon Musk and everything saying, yeah, we got to do that.
Merge with AI by improving the neural link between your cortex and your digital extension of yourself, which already, like I said, already exists.
And you have the Facebook team coming ahead and saying, oh, it's going to be great when you can just think only the thoughts you want to share right into your Facebook platform.
We are not talking about decoding your random thoughts. We're talking about decoding those words, the ones you've already decided to share, by sending them to the speech center of your brain.
People have already said that they'll trade their privacy away for some convenience of being able to type what they had for breakfast on Facebook, so this will just be fine.
And the Google policy about a lot of these things is to get right up to the creepy line but not cross it. I would argue that implanting things in your brain is beyond the creepy line.
Mine in particular.
Yes. At least for the moment, until the technology gets better.
Yeah, right now, today, privacy is a thin veneer and a kind of well-respected good idea that's not followed through with. Tomorrow, the concept of privacy as we know it now will no longer exist, just as Bilderberg said. I guess the one good news is that out of all the comments on this story, there's one person who says it's a good idea. Everyone else says, hell no, the only one who will have access to these things will be governments and their pigs. The government will be in your head.
Well, because that's all the rest of this technology, like these ones, which started and originated with the military, with DARPA, your television set, your internet, your computers, all of that, GPS, all of it. It was all weapons first. And then it came to you and everyone thinks it's just their friendly little technology. But every single one of these things we have now been told, admitted to our faces, that they can spy on us through them. There are backdoors in them. They can turn on cameras and microphones when you don't even know your television's on anymore. The CIA, right in your living room. They've admitted this. It's not a question of would they, it's a question of when are they? When aren't they? We don't know. That's how this technology works. So is it even really a leap then to say, what about when it's in my body and in my brain? It shouldn't be. And yet you read these articles and you have people saying things like, if you can read out the activity of people's brains and decode it, that's a much bigger threat to privacy. Again, this is the kind of statement, I mean, really? Did that even... We should be well beyond that in the conversation, and we're not. And they're coming up now. People at Davos, like I've mentioned this before in a prior video, they're coming out with phrases now where they're talking about cognitive liberty and the freedom of thought, because it's not automatically assumed just because you have a First Amendment right to free speech, or your Fourth Amendment or your Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself. Well, those are all things that have to do with what they claim is written words and spoken words, not your thoughts. So what these experts are coming out now saying is that legally there are no protections built in for the information in your brain. So if someone can access that remotely in your subconscious, thoughts you might not even know you're having, these are the kind of panel discussions people at Davos are having as to whether or not that information is sacred and private. And I feel like that should be a given, and yet they're now saying, no, clear distinction. We have to talk about whether or not we have a right to cognitive liberty. And that's not the conversation we should be having.
And again, they're trying to sell this to people. They're trying to make it as trendy as smartphones, which they got rapidly into everyone's hands voluntarily. Someday they may force people to take this, but right now it's still voluntary, and that's creepy enough. But as this commentator points out, there's still no cure for cancer. They can't even get Windows 10 functioning properly, and a million other technologies, and they're promising people the moon. They're promising people the ability to live like fantasy creatures and live alternate worlds. Well, they still don't have basic things figured out that are age-old on this planet.
But they're going to put a chip in your brain, and it'll just be like the Matrix. You'll just learn Kung Fu in 5 seconds. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. If people really think that's what it's going to be like, then we've all been dumbed down to a point that is frightening, okay? And speaking of 666, that date, actually, is brought up specifically in this Gizmodo article about DARPA's brain chip implants could be the next big mental health breakthrough or a total disaster, because they're talking about how they're going to use these chips on all manner of mental health issues. You know how we have all these mass shootings under Obama, and now we're starting to have a lot of mass shootings under Trump, and they're making that distinction like they've made for the past decade now. It's not the guns, which I agree with, it's the people using them, but they keep talking about the mental health issues. And then you had Obama put out all those mental health executive orders in relation to guns and how we're going to have to treat people. Well, that's going to meet somewhere with this technology where they're saying, well, we're going to use these brain chips to fix all of these people who have all of these depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, personality disorders. There's a whole list in here, and they're saying we're going to fix those people with these brain chips. Everything right down to people who get hand cramps. We're going to fix them all with these brain chips, okay? And interestingly, the first time that this was done to someone, just so happened to be on June 6th, 2006. It was the first time that they used implanted electrodes to remotely stimulate someone to not have depression feelings anymore. But as this article continues, there's an array of ethical questions. Does inserting a chip into someone's brain mediate their brain circuitry and change their identity? Might it eventually lead to the ability to simply treat ourselves when feeling blue, a sort of high-tech take on Aldous Huxley's Soma? Could you use a DBS device to hack into someone's brain, or control them, or enhance them? Is it potentially dangerous in the wrong hands? But these are the kinds of questions they always toss out in these articles, so blithely like that, and then don't ever answer. Isn't that nice? And then they just go on to tell you how great it all is. Well, in this article, I will give credit where it's due. They actually did mention a few of the possible downsides here, because they found out that even the people they've been helping with these things who have Parkinson's and stuff like that, some of them completely flip out. Like this person, electrical stimulation of their brain resulted in him anxiously crouching in a corner, covering his face with his hands and speaking with a childish high-pitched voice, which when he snapped out of it later, he couldn't even remember doing, so he completely disassociated from himself. You have other people who had this for Parkinson's, and 20% of them said they feel like a machine. It also goes on to say that some of the side effects of this technology are word fluency and verbal memory decline, depression, increased suicidal tendencies, anxiety, and mania. So it can completely change people's personalities. They go on to say that it can make you a different person, and it can make all the people around you think you've changed. Because ultimately, I don't think they've really figured out all of the different interconnections of the brain, which is one of the most complicated machines, if you will, on the planet. And I don't think they fully know what they're doing when they're in there, not even to this day. They just act like they do. But they want in there bad. It's the only place left that they haven't hacked.
And you know how this story goes, but I want to leave you with one more story, seemingly unrelated on the surface. There's a doctor in New Hampshire who's just had to revoke her doctor's license. She's 84 years old. She's been practicing since the 60s. And by all accounts, she's a fairly great doctor, has the personal touch of a small town, doesn't over-medicate people, gives them a lot of herbal remedies, and she's got herself in trouble for refusing to use a computer. She has lost her doctor's license. And it just goes to show you, they will eventually force you onto these platforms. This woman has been practicing medicine without complaint for years and years and years, but now because she doesn't know how to use a computer, doesn't have enough money to hire an assistant, she's been forced to turn in her license. And they're talking about for decades how this doctor has taken poor patients, people without insurance, anyone who can give her just $50 in cash, and that she never made big money off being a doctor, and she was just interested in helping people, and she really hasn't done anything wrong, except she hasn't complied with the 2014 law that was passed in New Hampshire requiring doctors to submit to the state's mandatory electronic drug monitoring program, aimed, perhaps with good intentions, at tracking opioids to keep people from overdosing and abusing the system. They're now shutting down what sounds like a pretty decent doctor as far as doctors go, because she can't and won't comply with submitting everyone's data into a computer system. That's today. Tomorrow it's these brain chips.
And it should just be on the record that these are the kinds of technologies that they were working on back during the CIA's MKUltra. Just saying. So this is something that they've been working on for a very long time now. They've just now decided they're going to start rolling it out and pushing it in everyone's face, because obviously behind the scenes, they've only been perfecting it since the 50s.
Absolutely, and the technology is not what's holding them up. It's the public's acceptance and usage and compliance with this stuff.
And they actually mention in here, just by the way, that with any treatment of any brain disease, we risk trying to make everyone the same and treat any variation from the norm as a sickness. We want to have this magical thinking, but are we going to eradicate depression? We shouldn't, because being human means the full spectrum of experiences. And it goes on to say, in the extreme is that we will have a kind of neuroeugenics with only one correct brain, one right way of thinking. And it says, yeah, we're already moving towards that. Just a right way of being in society at large. That's kind of what consumer culture relies on. And so what's next? SpongeBob bucket helmets? I mean, that's the way they make this sound.
Now activating helmet brain control devices.
I get it. We all did the trendy things with the cell phones and we walk around being tracked and traced all the time. But I don't know. I think they're going to have to wait a little bit longer before they get people to actually accept putting this in their brain. I hope so, because I don't think society is ever going to be the same again after they start putting chips in people's brains and hooking their brains to computers.
I can wait till I'm long gone. That would be fine with me. You never go full Kurzweil.
You need to make a t-shirt that says that.